Hey, Teddy, are you ready?
Hi, Teddy.
And we are delighted to welcome Lesley Forrester today. Hello, Lesley.
Hello, Lesley and Gunther, actually. This is Gunther.
Oh,
Hi,
hello.
Teddy.
How wonderful, Teddy. Look, you've got a cohort over there.
Gunther always likes to see what's happening on screen. He's very interested in tech, and he communicates quite well online. Better than me, I think.
Oh, brilliant. Oh, how wonderful. That's absolutely gorgeous. Well, now communication is a very important part of what you do. You have set up the Northern Animal Assisted Therapies and Activities. What is it all about?
Well, and I'm a speech and language therapist by background. I have worked with young children in an NHS role for a few decades now, and it took me until my early 40s to really think about why I didn't have animals in my life. Because if I'm really honest, they're my first love. And working long hours and long clinics, I never felt that I was really in a position where I could have dogs back in my life. And they'd meant so much to me growing up and so much to me as a person. And I really wanted to share that with children. And I began to look into what animal assisted therapy might offer my role and how I could actually bring together my love of animals with what I do in the world, which is help children who need support to communicate to the best of their ability. And that's where Natta began. So we acquired our first therapy dog, Heidi, who's snoozing on the rug. She's been working today, so she's chilling. And we acquired the Natta hens, the original flock of hens who work with us as well, and some other small fairies. And that was just pre-COVID. So we had a staggered start. We stopped and started and stopped and started, as many things did during COVID. And now I can't believe how the years have flown. Here we are, and we're working mostly with schools and other organisations to support children who have needs around communication or emotional well-being.
Well, it's absolutely gorgeous what you're doing, which is, of course, why you're here, because I got so excited when I learned about what you're doing. But what's interesting is that it's not just dogs that are involved. Tell us the range of animals that's involved.
Well, within our Natta team, we've got a range of animals. We have rabbits, Dunlop and Dave, and we have Heidi is our original therapy dog. She's a golden retriever, and then we have our new recruit, Gunther, the therapy dog cadet, who we're bringing on just now. And the Natta hens have always been a big part of what we do. So we have a small flock of bantam hens, small hens, and one big girl to keep them in order. Belinda's a Buff Orpington chicken. So we have they're a curious bunch. People always wonder at how very different and varied they are. So we have the hens, and I think having a variety of animals to work alongside does help us to meet the needs of different people. Some people are really very into dogs and feel very confident around them, and they immediately have this therapeutic value, as we know. But there are people for whom dogs are, being close to dogs can be stressful or difficult for them. And so we have other species with other assets. So they all bring something unique. And even within each species, the individual animals, their personalities bring a different dimension to what we do. And different clients or different service users might bond and enjoy the company of different animals on our team.
I just have this vision of these. I can't get the image of your hens out of my mind. So I just think that's brilliant. Who knew that hens could be therapy animals? It's wonderful. Um, so how does it work? Do you take them to schools? Do children come to you? How does it work?
It's a little bit of both, but primarily we are visiting children in their settings. The animals who do visits. We're all accustomed to visiting at a very early age, and we're kind of desensitized to working in those environments. So I guess these aren't typical animals who've lived their lives and now are being brought into these situations. They've kind of they've built a skill set, and they've built some resilience to some of the stresses that come in those settings. So they mostly do visits. Sometimes people come and visit here, but I think that is an important point, because the animals who do visiting are the animals who can cope with those environments and have that resilience, and they have to be prepared. And we can't just take any animal into a school, because it's difficult for us as human beings to really preempt how stressful that might be, or how animals are going to respond in that situation. It tends to be easier with dogs, because they are obviously they are predator species, so they're not prone to the same level of anxiety or the same type of anxiety as the small furries or the hens, who are prey species. So they need a little bit more preparation. But we teach people about how to make our animals feel as comfortable as they can be in a human environment. There's a bit of compromise needed. Obviously, schools are places for teaching and learning, but we have to make sure that the way those environments are set up meets the needs of our animals while we're there. We would love one day to have a place that is built around the animals, and that brings people and animals together in a place which is an animal environment, principally. But that's our plan for the future, is to try and acquire somewhere and build an environment that provides the optimum opportunities for animals and people to interact together. That would be good, wouldn't it, Gunther? Yes.
That day. So how you were talking about the need to make the animals feel comfortable in what could be a somewhat pressured or alien environment. What is it about the environments that could be stressful for an animal? And how do you go about assessing what's needed, which animal would fit which environment?
That's a really good question. I think it's not even as simple as talking about which species are a good fit. I think even within species, we have to consider the individual personalities and the preferences of the animals. I think understanding something about the animal as the species they are, and not making the mistake of assuming that they're processing the world in the same way we are, because dogs' noses are very different to people's noses. So they have a lot of sensitivity around smells, for example, whereas a hen's eyes are a lot more sensitive than a person's eyes. So in terms of vision, we have to kind of think about the hens might not feel comfortable if there were sudden movements, fast movements. We have to think that the dogs might not be happy if there were very strong smells. So there's a risk assessment to be done for every species and for every individual that considers their own unique needs. And we share that, and with anywhere that we go, we share that with the setting, and we ask adults in the setting to help us to make the experience as safe and comfortable as possible. And then whilst we're there, we ask for the help of adults and children to watch for signs, any indicators in the animals' bodies that they might be feeling uncomfortable. So we try and work as a team to spot any signs of stress or discomfort in the animals. And we train people to be able to respond to that in an appropriate way. So it's all about caregiving. And I think some of our students then, they take on that role, and that's where some of the benefits come for students, because they're thinking outside of the box about the needs of another living being. And so for a little while, at least, they forget to worry about their own kind of concerns, their own worries, kind of, they're distanced from them a little while, because they are concentrating on the needs of the animals.
That's absolutely brilliant, because what you're doing is, so ostensibly, the primary goal is to go in to assist the human side of the equation. But in actual fact, there's a secondary gain here, which is huge. And that is that you're also teaching people to be sensitive to animals and how to connect with animals. And I think that's absolutely brilliant, that you're able to do both under one umbrella.
I think they're kind of two equal and opposite sides of an equation, which balance beautifully in the middle. That actually, if the animals aren't happy and comfortable, then people won't get maximum benefit from their company and their companionship. So it only works for people. Actually, one serves the other entirely. So when the animals are happy, then they show all of their natural behaviors, which are really interesting for people to study and learn about. And they offer freely play and interaction. And they do what they do best when they're happiest and most comfortable. And many of the benefits for people come about because we're prioritizing actually the needs of the animals. We're saying that has to come first, and then we can reap the benefits.
Brilliant. So, what kinds of difficulties might the animals be helping children with?
I think when we first began, I envisaged seeing lots of children who had speech and language difficulties, and some do. Some may have difficulty expressing themselves. And one of the main things the animals do for them is provide a relationship that doesn't rely upon speech. So and provide opportunities to interact in a non-verbal way. So as we're talking to the children about how Gunther interacts and what kind of signs and signals he uses with his body, we're also encouraging children to do the same and express themselves in whatever way they can. And the animals, of course, they play and interact without putting any pressure on words at all. So those children who might have felt that they're either failing with using language, or perhaps they feel stuck because they don't have language as a tool, we're teaching them that they can express themselves anyway. And the animals respond to those non-verbal cues in a way that is absolutely non-judgmental. Gunther doesn't mind whether you have the words or not, do you, Gunther? As long as you've got a cuddle, and as long as you can be sensitive to how he's feeling and provide what he wants in terms of play and stimulation and attention, he doesn't mind whether you use words at all. The dogs understand Makaton signing, which is a simple gesture system of signs, and they can, children who don't speak can use gestures to communicate with them, for example, to bring a toy. So Heidi would be able to bring, I would ask her, put a range of toys out, and then we would ask her for banana, and the children who can't speak can sign banana, and Heidi would go, and that's right, Heidi would go, she's gone to find it, Heidi would go to find her banana. So it's a lot of pressure off speech, and that's so important for children with expressive communication problems, because they're often grappling with this problem. You know, our demand for words puts a huge pressure on them, and when that pressure is released, their confidence increases. So from a communication point of view, I think that's one of the main assets. But many of the children we've found, particularly since COVID, are struggling with needs that they're more around their mental health and their confidence. And for many children, the social isolation that came with COVID and removal from settings, not being able to go to school, also had an impact on their growing social communication skills. So children are finding it hard to get on with each other. And there's a lot of anxiety around relationships between children within peer groups. And I think the animals are all a very mindful presence. So when the animals are there in front of us, we all come together and share a focus, and we share the care and we share the play, and we forget to worry about how the person next to us is viewing us, or we leave behind the worries of yesterday, and we stop preempting what bad things might happen tomorrow, and we focus more on the animals and the activities, so we can be very present. And children often begin to communicate and form friendships through these activities without really realizing that they're doing it. And it's great to see their confidence grow in that way. Some children have social communication difficulties that mean they don't understand the rules, or they haven't yet extracted the rules of play and interaction with other children. And when we're teaching them about how to care for the dogs, they're also learning skills that they can apply with one another. So we talk about waiting and listening and watching to hear the dog's view. And of course, waiting and watching and listening is something that's going to be really helpful for them in their peer relationships as well. So they learn in a very non-threatening way by interacting with the dogs, skills that they can use in people relationships and in their lives.
It's crucial, isn't it? Because, you know, what you were talking about, you know, this period in which we were all basically imprisoned in our homes, the impact that it has on children is huge, because in terms of the early development, it's social interactions that are so important in building friendships and learning that not everybody thinks the same as you, and that, there is turn taking in communication. And, and it's so frustrating for children at the best of times when they go into nursery and they've got all these other little people like them all wanting to speak at the same time, and that feeling of not being heard. And all of that socialization that happens through interaction with other children was removed. And I love that bringing an animal in can very simply help to restore that, or to bring that for the first time, because they want to engage. That's the beautiful thing, isn't it? Children want to engage with animals. And so here you're saying, okay, you want to engage with an animal. There are certain social rules that you have to be mindful of. And it begins this notion of, oh, there are rules to interaction. That's good. I can learn this. I love that. That's absolutely wonderful.
And again, the species of animals can come in helpful depending on what particular needs children have around social communication. Children who might be very boisterous and loud and not recognize the impact of that behavior on others. Children who really struggle to pay attention and to wait their turn. Those children often might struggle to interact with the prey species, so the rabbits will tend to keep away. And so we get to practice quietness and calmness, where other children who are struggling with confidence, who wouldn't put it out there and really wouldn't know how to initiate or wouldn't feel comfortable with starting a conversation or a game, they can practice those skills with the dogs, who are very ready to pick up on their cues and join in. So depending on where that child's coming from and what their unique needs are, we can structure something that's likely to be helpful.
It's made me think about walking in the woods, and particularly when Teddy was younger, and we'd have these little children, running up to him, and I would just stand between them and I'd say, oh, hold on a minute. Just a minute.
Yeah.
And teaching them, to just be a little bit calmer when approaching, Teddy, and that Teddy would be fine being stroked as long as certain rules were followed. And I remember seeing parents almost kind of shocked that somebody was telling their children they couldn't just do what they wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
But I was always, because I have been a teacher. I was a teacher for many years in primary school, so I'm very used to talking to children, and the children would just be riveted, listening. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. I can't just rush up, and I'd explain. Well, if you do that, there's a risk that you're going to upset the dog, and the dog might not like being. How would you like somebody rushing up to you and just tussling your hair, and they'd go, oh, because they'd never ever thought of that. And so it's so lovely what you're saying, because you're creating this opportunity for learning a social skill. It's perfect. I also am very interested in the fact that the more nervy prey animals might actually be the best teachers for this.
Yeah.
Because they won't engage,
Yes, and that is, it's disappointing for children, particularly if there's an expectation in families that what we're offering is a petting session. So we try and make those expectations clear very early on, and we encourage parents and families or classes to teach certain key concepts and not have that expectation that we're going to hand our animals around to be handled, and as you say, maybe try and put yourself in that animal's shoes or feathers or fur and say, how would that feel, someone coming up to you? If you're an animal who would in the wild be expecting a predator to swoop down on you and take you, how would it feel as a bunny to be picked up? How might you feel? So asking children to adopt those perspectives and think about the ethology of the animals, where they come from, who their wild relatives are, and recognize how animals' experiences are different from theirs is potentially quite powerful. And the prey species do give us an opportunity to do that, to think about sensitivity. We sometimes put those concepts into songs, into music, to help mainly to help the adults to remember the concepts and to be able to practice them with the children. I haven't got the most wonderful singing voice, but I say to the children, look, we really need to listen to these messages, because if you don't listen, I'll have to sing it again. And they all go, oh, okay, I'll do it. And so we sing, quiet and gentle, soft and slow. Treat me kindly so I know you don't mean to frighten me. Then I might sit beside your knee. And if you don't listen, if you haven't remembered that, I'll have to sing it again. No, that's okay. I'll remember.
And it's got nothing to do with your lovely singing voice, and everything to do with the impatience of being able to do what you do, which is engage with the animal. I love that. That's perfect. In terms of communication, clearly this is huge, because they're nonverbal. And so if you're dealing with children who are nonverbal or struggling with the words, to discover that that others, not all species use words, must be an absolute revelation for them.
I think sometimes we can make assumptions about children who don't have words, that they also won't be able to appreciate body language, but they can actually learn about relationships because the animals provide this mirror and come towards them or away from them according to the way that they behave. So children can learn that without words they are communicating with animals as well. Obviously, we need to know as much about the children as possible before we go in there, so that we know particularly what level of understanding does the child have and what sort of sensory needs might a child have. So if a child is likely to really feel a compulsion to grab at a tail or grab it or poke an eye, then we have to have safeguards in place. So it's not always appropriate for every child to be able to go straight in there with the animal. Sometimes we're practicing through songs and stories, even using puppets to kind of model what a gentle touch might feel like and give feedback to children, so to get them ready for the experience of meeting an animal in real life. Because ultimately we want it to be positive. We want it to be something that both can enjoy. So sometimes that takes a little bit of preparation.
It's well known that there's this almost happy pairing between autistic children and animals, that autistic children seem to have a link with animals, and that they seem to benefit particularly from being around animals. What is your experience of working with autistic children in this way?
I find working with autistic children challenging and delightful in equal measures. They teach me as much as I teach them, mainly because every child is so very unique, and what it is to be autistic can vary so much from one child to another, that they're more different than would be members of the neurotypical population. So you really have to get to know each child as an individual. And I think whilst I do see wonderful things happen when an animal who puts no pressure on verbal communication comes along and offers support and friendship and play to an autistic individual and releases all that pressure for words. And I see the engagement and the joy that brings. That really is very fulfilling, but it always needs to have a knowledgeable adult alongside to help structure and scaffold and get the best out of those interactions. And the autistic people who we hear much less about are those for whom interacting with a dog would actually be really, really difficult. Because depending on how their sensory systems work, a dog might be ridiculously smelly, move very, very fast, be incredibly unpredictable. And many autistic individuals may be really fearful of dogs for very good reason, and perhaps don't have the language link with adult caregivers to be able to accept reassurance, understand explanations. So I think we do have to be really, really careful that we don't make an assumption that there will be a bond. Unfortunately, I get lots of contact from people, from families who've gone and gotten a therapy dog for their autistic child, and it hasn't worked out. I think there's also a misconception about therapy animals being the therapist, and whilst those interactions are doubtless therapeutic, the animals are animals, and they're not therapists. It needs to be done with guidance, with people who really know the child well and people who really know the dog well, bringing them together carefully in a way that feels good for both parties.
And that's the thing. When I was, it's animals. It's not specifically dogs, and you have to work out what the animal, what the species is. That's the good pairing. Um, and I think what you just said there. Animals are not therapists. It's such an obvious statement, but it's so important because people are so good at projecting expectations and projecting them onto the animal, particularly. They're not miracle workers. It might feel like it because the result can be so extraordinary over time, but they're not therapists. It's so important, isn't it?
The thing that feels like magic does have science behind it. And if we can study and understand the science, then we can maximize the gains and also minimize the risks, because there is undeniably a risk that a child acting in an unpredictable way or in an inappropriate way could trigger an animal or cause a not nice interaction to happen. So I think studying the reasons why animal assisted therapy works enables us to tap into the best bits, enhance all the best bits, and minimize the risks of any unpleasant experiences between the two. But biophilia is a very powerful force, this sense of human beings being drawn to other species and wanting to be close to and understand other life forms. And we can bring them together in lots of different ways depending on the comfort level of a human being. So I take it with a pinch of salt when I'm told this child doesn't like animals, it wouldn't be appropriate for them. Because maybe they don't want to touch animals, but maybe animals don't want to be touched. We can watch from a distance, we can arrange environments, we can prepare meals, we can read to, sing to, talk to. I think there's perhaps too much emphasis on the cuddling, which is really nice once you've got a relationship and there is trust there. But as adults, we need to be careful not to force animals and children together to make the magic happen. We have to provide the right circumstances, make sure both feel safe, and then allow trust in them to find their own relationship. It's not forced upon them, and the expectation needs to be carefully managed.
Absolutely. It is one of the very first things that you talked about is, teaching to listen and to watch and to be sensitive. And that applies in every sense to what you do. So this is absolutely beautiful and wonderful. You've given us such an insight into a very special project. And so if people wanted to find out how to get in touch and get some help or get involved in some way, how do they do that?
I'm always delighted to talk with people who have similar interests, and I think we need a growing network of people who really want to know about, who want to discover how to do this and do this well. And I'm a learner in this, absolutely a learner. I just want to reach out and connect with all of these other people, because for as many people as there are helping one another learn, all of their animals are also helping us to learn. So yeah, absolutely. The website is www.nata, which is NAATA.co.uk, and yeah, I'd be delighted to hear from anybody who wanted to chat about or find out more about what we do. Obviously, we're quite limited in terms of capacity to deliver activities because our dogs have kind of strict working guidelines, and we have you know, they work for a defined chunk of time, and they always have rest intervals in between any working sessions. But that's not to say that we can't talk and help each other.
Is there a particular temperament that you're looking for in an animal to be a therapy animal?
I think I would struggle with any animal that didn't show any interest in people at all. There are animals for whom we're irrelevant or not interesting. So all of our animals have interest. I think beyond that, obviously an animal with a gentle disposition, I think any animal, even those who you can't be physically close to, can have a therapeutic effect, because you can stand on the other side of the fence and still talk about and learn about the animals and interact with them without actually physically touching them or being in there with them. So actually, I'm not sure that it's not always necessary to have an animal who wants to play with you to gain therapeutic value from those interactions. But obviously, canines, dogs really are a man's best friend, and the fact that they're so eager to be with you and be involved. So an animal who's eager to be involved. Gunther, who's been on screen, might not appear immediately to be the best therapy dog, because he's not really massively under my control. I'll be honest, hands up, he kind of does what he wants to do a lot of the time. And sometimes he doesn't listen very well, and sometimes he doesn't wait very well. Yes, I'm talking about you. But actually, he's a role model for the children. So I think as long as animals enjoy and take from those interactions and want and show a keen interest in being with people, as long as they're getting back, then their personalities are their personalities. You work with that. And when Gunther struggles to listen, and you know, the children take part in helping to train him, and on a day when his listening isn't very good, then we talk about, what does it feel like when your ears aren't working very well? Maybe you've got a lot on your mind. I wonder what he's thinking about. I wonder what he's distracted by. Maybe there's a smell over there. How can we help him? What do you do when you find it hard to listen? Or how would you help your friends to listen? So beyond wanting to be with us, I think most of the things you can work with, it's just about getting the right match between the client group and the children and the animals, so both are enjoying it.
Wonderful. That's absolutely gorgeous. I will be putting a link to your website in the description box so that people can find you easily. Lesley, thank you so much for your time today.
It's been delightful. Thanks for the opportunity. Lovely to talk to you and Teddy.
Now gone, I think, to get some dinner.
Now Heidi and Gunther are snoozing with their teddy bears. So
beautiful. Thank you again, Lesley, and thank you all for watching. Until next time, goodbye.